Shalom, shalom. Welcome to part 3 of the 2016 Pesach special here at Scroll to Scroll. Okay, so I promised to get into a very special teaching about Joshua, and that is because our Haftorah reading for this part of the Pesach special is from Joshua. So we're going to be reading quite a bit in the early chapters here. Joshua 3:5 through 7. Then 5:2 through 6:1, and then 6 verse 27. So let's get started. Starting in verse 5, chapter 3 of the book of Joshua. And Joshua said to the people, "Purify yourselves, for tomorrow Yahweh will perform wonders in your midst." And then Joshua ordered the priests, "Take up the Ark of the Covenant, and advance to the head of the people." And they took up the Ark of the Covenant, and they marched at the head of the people. And Yahweh said to Joshua, "This day, for the first time, I will exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so that they shall know that I will be with you, as I was with Moshe." That's the official reading. What's going to happen next, as we're going to get into momentarily, is that the priests carry the ark through the river, and the river parts, and this is a big calendar thing going on. They set up 12 stones for the tribes of Israel. So we're going to get into that shortly, but let's go to the second part of our Haftorah reading, which is 5 verse 2 through 6 verse 1. 5 verse 2 reads, "And at that time Yahweh said to Joshua, make flint knives and proceed with a second circumcision of the Israelites." As we're going to see, the circumcision is part of a wider pattern of circles. To circumcise literally means to cut in a circle. Okay? So Joshua had flint knives made, and the Israelites were circumcised at Gibeath Haraloth, which I think is something like Hill of Foreskins, right? This is the reason why Joshua had the circumcision performed. All the people who had come out of Egypt, all the males of military age, had died during the desert wanderings after leaving Egypt. Now, whereas all the people who came out of Egypt had been circumcised, none of the people born after the Exodus during the desert wanderings had been circumcised. Isn't that odd? I mean, you would think that they would have passed that on. You know, the Egyptians themselves have a tradition of circumcision. So this is how bad the morality was of the people in the wilderness. They didn't even think to circumcise their children. For the Israelites had traveled in the wilderness 40 years until the entire nation, men of military age who had left Egypt, had perished because they had not obeyed Yahweh. But that's not an excuse, guys. Not good. And Yahweh had sworn never to let them see the land that Yahweh had sworn to their fathers to assign to us, a land flowing with milk and honey. But he had raised up their sons in their stead. And it was these that Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised, not having been circumcised along the way. After the circumcising of the whole nation was completed, they remained where they were, in the camp, until they recovered. Now this may be if there was a Guinness Book of World Records back circa 1400 BC, this probably would go down as the largest mass circumcision in history. Okay? Remember what we're dealing with. You're dealing with still like 1 million plus people all getting, and from the male population, so cut it in half. No pun intended. Cut it in half, maybe 500,000. That's a lot to do, don't you think? And it's people of all ages. It's not just a bunch of infants anymore. That must have been quite a day. Okay. And they remained where they were in the camp until they recovered. And Yahweh then said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt." To roll away, Gelah, and in the place of rolling away, Gilgal. Right? So more circles, as we will see later. So that place was called Gilgal. meaning rollaway place, basically, as it still is. Encamped at Gilgal, the steps of Jericho, the Israelites offered the Passover sacrifice on the 14th day of the month towards evening. On the day after the Passover offering, on that very day, they ate of the produce of the country, unleavened bread, and parched grain. Now, it's really helpful to do a study in the Hebrew. There are at least 3, if not 4 or 5, different words for grain in Hebrew. And one of these is kalili, which specifically means parched grain. Okay? And before bikurim, before first fruits, you cannot have that grain. Right? So this is a timeline here. And I'll be talking about that timeline in greater detail in a moment. On that same day, they ate the produce of the land. The manna had ceased. The Israelites got no more manna. That year they ate of the yield of the land of Canaan. Once, when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing before him, drawn sword in hand. This is Yeshua, by the way. One of his 24 appearances. Joshua went up to him and asked him, "Are you one of us or of our enemies?" He replied, "No, I am a captain of Yahweh's hosts," which is exactly what Yeshua will be in the book of Revelation if you read it. Right? "Now I have come." Joshua threw himself face down on the ground, prostrating himself, said, "What does my Lord command his servant?" The captain of Yahweh's hosts answered Joshua, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is set apart ground." Where have you heard that before? Right? Now Jericho was shut up tight because of the Israelites. No one could leave or enter. And then the last line, verse 27, chapter 6. And Yahweh was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. Okay. Now, with that Haftorah reading done, we can go deeper and include stuff not only in Joshua, but in parts of Joshua, not only in that reading of Joshua, but there were places that were skipped over that we're going to get into, and other scriptures that are going to shed light on this, what we call the calendar sequence of Joshua 4. It's actually 4 and 5. So we're going to shift gears, and I want you now to think of circles. So this is a circle code. Okay? And the scripture itself gives us 4 main beloved circles from Father Yah. We're going to start with the first 3 for now. Circle number 1 from Proverbs 8 verse 27. When he established the heavens, I was there, when he inscribed a circle upon the face of the deep. And Revelation 12 verse 1. And a great wonder was seen in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and at her head a crown or circle of 12 stars. It's inscribed on, you have a circle inscribed on the face of the deep, otherwise known as matter, okay? The atoms, the fabric of the universe. And you have a circle of stars, a crown on her head. And Isaiah 40:22 says that Father Yah sits enthroned above the circle of the earth. So far then, the deep, matter, the stars, and the earth have circles. Circle of the face of the deep, that was the canvas and general demarcation line drawn by Father Yah. It is upon this foundation that the circle crown of stars is overlaid. And by the way, we'll see that in a moment with Job 9:9, which will confirm that witness. The star's job, though, is to point the naked eye to the 30-degree sliver of dark space that represents 1/12 of the solar year. This imagery is described, as I said, in Job 9:9. He, Yahweh, has set a seal, a chotemet, upon the stars. This is a very important word. The Hoetemet, the basic meaning of the root is to seal, and it refers to various kinds of documents that were authenticated by affixing seal impressions from a stamp or cylinder seals. Okay? That's what the king would use to authenticate his commands on the document. Okay? The one was stamped in the clay or wax, while the other was rolled across it, leaving an impression. That's not my opinion. That's Brown Drivers Briggs. By Isaiah in 40 verse 22 of his book, calling the earth a circle, which is actually a sphere, and some people want to push me back on that a little bit, but I've looked at this, and I am convinced Hug is a sphere or a vault, an arc, a curve, not arc as in A-R-K, but as in A-R-C. And I've looked at every place where Hug appears, and it's like the curve of the space or the curvature of the earth. Okay? Period. It's not flat like a pancake or a quarter. It's a sphere. So, just saying that real quickly. Isaiah is the first person to recognize that the earth is a sphere. Isaiah does this beating out the astronomer Eratosthenes, who was the chief librarian of the library at Alexandria, Egypt, by about 500 years. Abba Yahweh knows what he's doing. Okay? And Father Yah spoke to Joshua saying, as we read here, in Joshua 4, verses 1 through 3, we did not read from chapter 4 for the Haftorah. But we need to fill in the pieces here, and this is one of them. Take for yourselves 12 men from the people, one man from each tribe, and command them, saying, take up for yourselves 12 stones from here out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet are standing firm. Okay, so I want you to, well, 1 second. And carry them over with you and lay them down in the lodging place where you will lodge tonight. That's Joshua 4, 1 through 3. Our first step in understanding this critical chapter is to see that the priests kept the calendar secrets. They proclaimed the set-apart occasions to ancient Israel. That was their job. Leviticus 23, 1 through 2, actually 1 through 4. Hosea 4, verse 6. Malachi 2, verse 7. Matthew 23, 1 through 4. Now let's see how these next few lines will relate. Okay? And actually, before I get into these lines, I want you to understand that in many places, not all of them, but gold objects, especially the Ark of the Covenant, represent the sun. Okay? You've got wings like sun rays with the cherubim like this. And the dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant, no, I'm not getting into this right now, they are the dimensions of what we call the windows of heaven. And the windows of heaven help track the sun through its rising and setting patterns throughout the entire year. These calendar things go very, very deep, which is why it's taken me several decades to sort a lot of this out. Okay? But my point about this, I want you to think about the ark for a second. And you've got the ark facing you. And here's the mercy seat above. And you've got one pole here and the other pole behind it. Got the image? What's going on is the pole that is in front of you is vernal equinox. The pole that is behind you is fall equinox. And so you go like this, front to back for half the year, and then back to front for the other half of the year. Now, the other thing is that you have the ark, which looks like the sun. You have the seasons, or at least dividing by the equinoxes, the turns of the year, front to back to front like this. And then you have the 4 priests. 4 priests, 4 seasons. Now, in the book of Numbers, when the tribes of the Israelites march out, they march out in a particular pattern that are joined to the 4 tribes, the 4 divisions of the Levites, okay? Which is to say, those who are the priests, the Cohens, those who are Merari, those who are Gershom, those are the 2 tribes that build up and take down the tabernacle, and those who are of Kohath. Each group of Levites represents a season, like the 4 priests each represent a season, the season of the golden box, the sun. Okay? And so, with that in mind, understanding this is a calendar code, we're also going to see that this is the right time of year to have a calendar code. So let's keep going. Joshua called the 12 men to whom he had appointed from the sons of Israel, 1 man from each tribe. So if the priests are 4 seasons, then these men are the months, right? Kind of makes sense? And Joshua said, cross again to the ark of Yahweh your Elohim in the middle of the Jordan, and each of you take up a stone on his shoulder. And by the way, the Jordan is representing the waters above the firmament. Okay? Take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Israel, and let this be a sign among you. So let's stop for a moment and analyze this. This is a big deal. The sign among you, the same word, oath, is used in conjunction with the stars, sun, and the moon, bringing in the seasons. This is definitely a calendar code. You can read about that sign in Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19. Signs, seasons, days, and years. Right? The Brown Rivers Briggs confirms that and says of this word in Joshua 4:6, oath, signs, tokens of changes of weather and times. Genesis 1:14 of heavenly luminaries, signs, memorials, stones from Jordan. So Brown River Briggs is making a clear linkage between these stones that are in a river. They're not just stones, they are signs. And they are linked to the sun, moon, and stars. Now look at this. So that when your children ask later, saying, what do these stones mean to you? Then you will say to them, because the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of Yahweh. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off, so these stones shall become a memorial to the sons of Israel forever. That's Joshua 4, verses 6 through 7. I'm just going straight like this. See? One step at a time, one line at a time. So this is clearly an allusion or a remembrance to the parting of the waters. The waters of the Jordan were cut off. The parting of the waters of the Jordan before you had, the parting of the waters at the time of the Exodus. Now, how do I know that this is sort of a mirror image of the Sea of Reeds? It's the same month. I'll show you. Let's see it confirmed. For Yahweh your Elohim dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed, just as Yahweh your Elohim had done so with the Sea of Reeds, which you dried up before us until we had crossed. The text is making this comparison between the Jordan drying up and the Sea of Reeds, and we're going to get the calendar connection in a moment. That all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of Yahweh is mighty, that you may fear Yahweh your Elohim forever. Joshua 4, verses 23 through 24. Now, let's talk about the place where they're at. Gilgal. Gilgal means sacred circle of stones. That's again according to Brown River Briggs. That's not my opinion. Sacred circle of stones. Gilgal. And at Gilgal, what do they have? A sacred circle of stones. Okay? And not just any amount of stones. 12. Then Yahweh said to Joshua, today I have rolled away, which is Galal, the reproach of Egypt from you. So the name of the place was called Gilgal, rolling away place, like we said. That's Joshua 5, verse 9. And just to make sure that we don't miss the circles that are all over the place, we are tripping over circles. that is given at the place named Stone Circle, where a stone circle was laid at the feet of the priest. We then have what we read earlier. Make yourself flint knives and cut in a circle. Circumcise. So there's another circle. Are we seeing the pattern? I think we are, right? There's more circles to see still, because this goes straight back to the start at Mount Sinai. Where's the circle at Mount Sinai? It's in Numbers, chapter 2, verses 1 through 2. Now Yahweh spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, saying, the sons of Israel shall camp each by his own standard with the banners, there it is again, of their father's household. They will camp around, meaning in a circle, around the tent of meeting at a distance. Now, a lot of folks, maybe not a lot, but a significant amount, tell me they don't like me saying this. No, it's a square. No, it's a circle. And even when there is a square, there's a circle inside it. That's another story. People go, well, why are you so determined on that one, Andrew? You know, clearly they're laid out in a grid. Well, here's the thing. It's this word that is in the text. Now, I'll get to that word in a second, but there's the word before it I want to talk to. Again, banners, oath, designates the signs that bring in the seasons, and the sign of the 12 stones from the Jordan we just saw, and those stones are a sign, and they are a circle. Because, and the linkage to Sinai is because in that Numbers verse, the word is sabib. Sabib only relates to a circle shape, that it is going around. Now, some folks are going to say, well, you kind of go around in a square too. I respect that position, but I have yet to see that specifically delineated in the word. I'm going to stand firm on this. Sabib is not just going around in any way. It's not just going around like this. It's not going around like this. It's going around like that. Okay? And finally, 1 Chronicles 27 assists us here, because we talked about the sun, which is the ark, the equinoxes, front pole, back pole, the seasons, the 4 priests, and the 12 stones around it, the 12 months, right? Now, we're going to see this confirmed. This is actually confirmed quite a few places. 1 Chronicles 27 tells us that it assigns 12 divisions, 1 for each month of the year, right? Now, if it was a lunar solar calendar, in other words, if we're going lunar months and solar years, right, every couple of years, every 2 to 3 years on average, we would have to add a 13th month. But they never add a 13th division to the troops here in 1 Chronicles 27. Which means the months are always 12, not intercalated, which means they're not lunar, which means they are, that's right, solar. Okay? Now, I'll show you one other place where that appears really quickly, which is in the book of 1 Kings. I'm just going to turn to this super quickly. 1 Kings, I want you to go to chapter 4. Okay, 1 Kings, almost there, chapter 4. Here we are. Verse 7. 1 Kings 4, verse 7. Solomon had how many prefects? 12. Governing all of Israel, who provided food for the king and his household. Each had to provide food for 1 month of the year. So every year there are only 12 months. Only 12. No lunar months. This is not to say that lunar months didn't exist, but they were used in a different way. The lunar months play in a solar universe, right? They answer to the solar months, to the solar year. Okay, so next, we're going to be reading from 2 Kings, as long as we're in 2 Kings, or we were in 1 Kings actually. Might as well flip over to 2 Kings. 23, verses 1 through 9, and 21, verse through 25. Okay? So 23, 1 through 9. So here we are, flipping around. I couldn't tab my JPS with all those places we have to go to, so just flipping to it. Here we go. At the king's summons, all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem assembled before him. The king went up to the house of Yahweh together with all the men of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and the priests and the prophets and all the people young and old. And he read from them the entire text of the covenant scroll, which had been found in the house of Yahweh. The king stood by the pillar and solemnized the covenant before Yahweh, that they would follow Yahweh to observe his commandments, his injunctions, and his rules with all their heart and all their soul, that they would fulfill all the terms of the covenant, as inscribed upon the scroll, and all the people entered into the covenant. Then the king ordered that the high priest Hilkiah, the priest of the second rank, and the guards of the threshold to bring out the temple of Yahweh. Right? So the high priest and the priests who work for the high priest. Right? Temple of Yahweh. All the objects made for Baal and Asherah. Right? This is because of Manasseh and Ammon. And the host of heaven, and he burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields of the Kidron. And he removed the ashes to Bethel. He suppressed the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had appointed to make offerings at the shrines and towns of Judah and in the environs of Jerusalem. And those who made offerings to Baal, to the sun, moon, and constellation, all the host of heaven. For all my talk about sun, moon, and stars, I do not do horoscopes. I do not rely on astrology. I do not in any way endorse New Age, Old Age, paganism, theology, or practice. I don't. I am see, the pagans are the ones who come last. The pagans stole from the Hebrews, and then they corrupted what they stole. Abraham counts the stars, right? Safar, Genesis 15:3. Count the stars. Write them in a book. Reckon them. Keep track of them. Father Yahweh says, I give birth to the stars and I give all of them names. Psalm 147 verse 4. Heavens declare the glory of Yahweh, and his heavenly host his heavenly host proclaiming the work of his hands. Right? Psalm 19 verse 1. Psalm 19 has the most accurate ancient depiction of a solar year that has ever been found. 3,000 years old, perfectly accurate. So I'm trying to put it back into its original kosher context before the pagans ran away with it and turned it into a religion. The stars, the sun, the moon were meant to glorify Yahweh, and they were meant to call out his feasts. So he brought out the image of Asherah from the house of Yahweh at the Kidron Valley of Jerusalem, and he burned it in the Kidron Valley. He beat it to dust, and he scattered its dust over the burial ground of the common people. He tore down the cubicles of the male prostitutes in the house of Yahweh. You imagine that? Prostitutes? Male prostitutes? In the temple? Really? The place where the women wove coverings for Asherah. So now you've got a pagan fertility cult where they're weaving stuff for the goddess and having sex. Illicit sex. In the temple. Dedicated. Not even to Father Yah. Although if it was, it would still be corrupt and perverse. He brought all the priests from all the towns from Judah to Jerusalem, and defiled the shrines where the priests had been making offerings from Geba to Beersheba. He also demolished the shrines of the gates which were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the city prefect, in which were on a person's left as he entered the city gate. The priests of the shrine, however, did not ascend to the altar of Yahweh in Jerusalem, but they ate unleavened bread along with their kinsmen. You can imagine. You want to talk about purging the hometz from the house. Imagine that house is the temple. And imagine that the purging is not just of the bread, it's of the prostitutes, the goddess cult, the perversion, and all these terrible idols that are strewn all over the temple, let alone in Jerusalem, let alone in the rest of Judah. If there ever was a case for making sure a Pesach was pure, it's this one. Right? And then we're going to skip ahead to 21 through 25 of the same chapter, 2 Kings 23. The king, of course we're talking about Josiah, right? Or is it Hezekiah? Hilkiah is Josiah. Okay. The king Josiah commanded all the people, offer the Pesach sacrifice unto Yahweh your Elohim, as prescribed in the scroll of the covenant. Now, before I get into this, why would the rabbis not also talk about Hezekiah's Passover? Not that they don't appreciate Hezekiah or his Passover, but Hezekiah, he through no fault of his own, he was not able to do the Pesach in the first month. He had to do it in the second month. The priests had not purified themselves in sufficient numbers as to be able to slaughter the lambs. So he waited, as we said, and then employed the exception of Numbers 9. It is to Hezekiah's credit, eternal credit, and enormous credit, that Hezekiah was not going to wait another year. He's like, you know what? I'm not waiting another 12 months. I want to do that Pesach. I want to do it now. And even if it is a little bit out of time, it's still legal. We're going to do it. But Josiah says, thank you, Granddad, but I want to do it at the right time. And that's what this is. That's why this is called the Great Pesach in Judaism. Okay? So with that in mind, the king commanded all the people, offer the Passover sacrifice of Yahweh your Elohim as prescribed in the scroll of the covenant. That Torah scroll had just been found in Josiah's 18th year, when it had been put into a wall and plastered over. Okay? Now the Passover sacrifice had not been offered in that manner in the days of the chieftains who ruled Israel, or during the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. Meaning, it hadn't been offered on time and thoroughly correctly. Only in the 18th year the king Josiah was such a Passover sacrifice offered in the manner to Yahweh in Jerusalem. Josiah also did away with the necromancers, the mediums, the idols, the fetishes, and all the detestable things that were to be seen in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem. Thus he fulfilled the terms of the Torah recorded in the scroll that the priest Hilkiah had found in the house of Yahweh. And I believe this Hilkiah is the same Hilkiah who was Jeremiah's father. I can't prove it, but, I do believe it. And even though Hilkiah is called the high priest elsewhere, he's called priest here. And Jeremiah's father is simply called a priest. There was no king like him, meaning Josiah, before, who turned back to Yahweh with all his heart, soul, and might, and did in full accord with the teaching of Moshe. Nor did any like him arise after. And by the way, the person writing these words is probably also Jeremiah. Most scholars believe that Jeremiah, he didn't write the book of 1 and 2 Kings. Those were court records, that were held for the various kings. But he edited it into a final form, and Jeremiah put his own theological spin on it as he's editing it. And that's very, very evident, especially when it comes to King Josiah. Jeremiah is not objective. He doesn't want any bad things about Josiah anywhere in his book. Okay? But the guy who writes Chronicles gives us a fuller story. Now, I know that that idea can be a little bit unsettling to some, but the bottom line is this. Regardless as to how Jeremiah may have let his loyalty to Josiah run a bit too far, Father Yahweh still preserved his word. Father Yahweh still used Jeremiah in a mighty, kosher, righteous way. And he knew that he would make sure that we had all the information we needed, because we've also got 1 and 2 Chronicles. Okay. So now we're finally going to get into our renewed covenant readings. First one, we're going to read from Luke chapter 2. Because obviously this is the Pesach that Yeshua does as a 12-year-old boy. So as you turn to Luke chapter 2, verses 41 through 52. Actually, I have it here in the notes. Our first day renewed covenant reading. All right. Sometimes I refer to it and sometimes I have it in the notes. And every year his people would go to Jerusalem during the feast of the Pascha. And then when he was 12 years old, they went up as they were accustomed to the feast. And after the days of the feast were completed, they returned. But the boy Yeshua remained in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his father and Joseph and his mother did not know, for they were hoping that he was with the people in their company. Now, this is also another witness about Pesach being that the feast is enjoyed in family groups, right? So they came up, Yeshua's family, and they probably came up in several different, divisions, if you will. And when Yeshua wasn't found where his parents thought they were, they simply went to the next group of relatives, because nobody feasts by themselves, as Josephus says. And they searched him among the relatives and among the people who knew them. And they did not find him. So they returned to Jerusalem and were seeking him. And after 3 days, they found him in the temple while sitting in the midst of the teachers. And he was listening to them and questioning them. All those who were listening to him were amazed by his wisdom and by his answers. I would love to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation with the rabbis. Because at this point, here's 12-year-old Yeshua. Not only does he have to prove he knows the Torah, he's probably got to discuss a lot of the oral law. And that's something that you typically don't have a boy do. You got to go through the full training before you can get to oral law. And here's a 12-year-old kid who knows that tradition better than the rabbis do. And that's why they're amazed. And they should be. And when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said to him, "My son, why have you acted this way towards us? For behold, I and your father were searching for you with much anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not realize it was necessary for me to be in the house of my father?" But they didn't understand the saying that he had told them. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject to them. And his mother kept all these words in her heart. And Yeshua would grow in his stature and in his wisdom and in favor with Elohim and man. Now, our last scripture reading for this part of the Pesach special is from Yochanan, chapter 18, verse 28 through 40. A very different Pesach with a very different outcome. And they brought Yeshua from the presence of Caiaphas into the praetorium. And it was morning, and they did not enter into the praetorium, that they would not be defiled before they had eaten the Pascha. We talked about this in the earlier parts of this special. The Pharisees did not eat their 14th Abib lamb when they were supposed to. They had helped so many people slaughter their 14th Abib lamb. And they retreated into oral law, which allowed them to slaughtered theirs at sunset. And we went into the details of that. John is not running a day behind. It's the first thing that we talked about. Continuing. And Pilatus went outside to them and said to them, "What accusation do you have against this man?" And they answered and said to him, "If he was not an evildoer, we would not have even delivered him to you." That's kind of arrogant. Don't worry your pretty little Gentile head about this, Pilate, is basically what they're saying to him. Not only arrogant, but rude and very dangerous to talk to Pilate that way. Let's be clear. Pilate is not a good guy. Pilate is out to destroy the Jewish religion. That's what Josephus says. People think Joe's just a little hot-headed about that. I don't think so. Pilate is one of the greatest anti-Semites who have ever lived. And Pilate had no problem using his powers as governor to suppress the arrogant. Why give him a reason? If he was not a doer of evil, we would have not delivered him to you. Pilate's like, this is boring, right? You take him and judge him according to your own Torah. So you wanna beat him or whatever you want to do, but he knows they're not out to just give Yeshua 39 lashes and stuff like that. He knows they want him dead, but he wants them to come to him and ask him because they say, Yehudim said it is not lawful for us to kill a man. So in other words, we need your permission to kill him. When we would rather that you kill him the Roman way. Why? Because then maybe people will they're going to blame you. They're not going to blame us. Didn't quite work out that way. But nevertheless, crucifixion is a Roman execution carried out by Roman soldiers under the Roman command of the Roman governor, who also gives permission for them to take the body down. Okay. That the word might be fulfilled that Yeshua said when he made known by what death he was about to die. Now Pilate entered into the praetorium and called Yeshua and said to him, "Are you their king? Are you the king of the Yehudians?" Yeshua said to him, Have you yourself spoken this, or have others said this concerning me?" Pilate said to him, "Why? Why would they confide in me? Am I a Yehudian? Am I a Jew? The sons of your people and your own high priest have delivered you to me. So tell me, what have you done?" Yeshua said to him, "My kingdom is not of this world. This is my kingdom. If it was of this world, my servants would have fought for me, or else I would be delivered to the Yehudians now. But my kingdom is not from here." Now, this is interesting. It's like Pilate's only listening to this, king, 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 king. That's all Pilate's really focusing in on, it seems. But he's explaining, yes, I am a king, but I'm not the same type of king that your emperor is. But Pilate simply says, "You are a king." Yeshua said to him, "You have said that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I have come into the world, that I might testify concerning the truth. Everyone who is of the truth will hear my voice." By the way, including Pilate's wife. She's like, Claudia, tradition says that's her name. Claudia basically was like, "Look, I had a bad dream about this guy. He's too righteous. Don't mess with him. Don't do anything to him, please." But Pilate had to do what any Roman governor would do. So Pilate says to him, "What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Yehudians, and he said, "I do not find even one cause against this man," meaning he's not broken any Roman laws. And that's all I care about, Roman laws. Right? If I'm going to execute him in a Roman way, You need to show me that he's broken a Roman law. I don't care if he's broken one of your little itty-bitty traditional Jewish laws, in other words. I mean, I really, really don't care, is what Pilate is saying. But you have a custom that I release one person to you during the Pascha. Therefore, do you want me to release this king of the Yehudeans to you? And all of them cried out and said, not this man, Barabbas. Now this Barabbas was a robber. Well, actually, he's a murderer. They'd rather release the murderer because he slit Roman soldiers' throats. And he stole. So, very different Pascha, Pesach, and a very different outcome, which is coming. And so that is the end of part 3. We will be continuing our Torah readings in part 4 and have some other surprises coming your way for that. Stay tuned. Shalom.